Hello, Avengers, and welcome to another special episode of Avenger Radio. My name is Bransen Gibson, and I'm here talking all things Avondale FC. And this week, I'm joined by Avondale Club Secretary and former player Anthony Nuzzaco. G'day, Anth. How's it going?
Evening, Bran. Keeping well?
That's good. How you are handling the break from football and everything?
Yeah, it's been not too bad. I've been working from home, which is luckily enough for me. Coping all right at home, doing as much as I can around the house when I get some free time, but I'm keeping well all in all.
What's been your main go-to activity to stay busy during the whole shutdown and everything?
It's been hard trying to get out in the backyard as much as I can. It's a bit stuffy inside all day long on the computer, but Netflix is getting a workout at night, and too much eating and drinking. So it's wearing us down a little bit, but other people in worse positions than us. So we've got to get through it all together.
Are you missing football at all?
Oh, a lot. The first 2 weeks for us, especially in the committee, it was good to have a little break, so to speak. But of course, you miss it. You do it, 50 weeks of the year after year, and there's so much that needs to be done behind the scenes that you just want to get out there and get things done. And now's a good time to sort of catch up on things that the games have stopped. So it's just hard when you can't get to the club and do those things. Even just to get down to training and watch the boys train, or obviously the games on the weekend, which would built up a bit of momentum before the stoppage. I think everyone just wants to get back to it now, but it's still a bit unknown as to when that will happen.
And so, Anthony, you're on the board, and obviously this is an unprecedented time with the postponement of the season. How has the club as a whole sort of approached the break?
Yeah, look, like you said, something that we hadn't had to face before, and like everyone else, I guess we're sort of trying to do our best to get through and make sure the club comes through the other end of it in a good position, which is going to be tough because a lot of different sides of the club gets affected, as any business does. People see the short-term implications, which is worrying for a lot of people, especially those around the club that aren't working at the minute. But we've got to also look at next year and the year after, and how this potential postponement of the season or non-season will affect us next year and the year after. So we've got to make sure that the club's still standing and still ready to compete whenever the league recommences, both for the juniors and the seniors, of course. So there's a lot to be done and a lot of planning to do. And we're just trying to work through it. And until we sort of get a more certain date as to when we're going to recommence, it's sort of hard to plan in the short term. But we're working behind the scenes to make sure as much is ready to go as possible.
Have you heard any inside word about a likely resumption date, or is it all just still up in the air?
Yeah, it's up in the air, but a few dates have been put out there, but it's all dependent on what the government does. Especially we've seen here in Victoria the last couple of weeks being a lot more stricter than the rest of the country, which isn't a bad thing because we've been pretty lucky compared to other parts of the world. But at this time, if we sort of set our minds to a July restart, then that might be a bit too optimistic, depending on what happens, in the coming weeks leading up to winter. So at this stage, you sort of plan that there will be a season, and we are confident that it will happen. Just a matter of how long we have to wait till we can get back out there.
So during the break in the season, you've sort of been working as the unofficial sort of club statistician behind the scenes. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and what you've been able to put together.
Yeah, so now that I've got a bit more time on my hands at home, I started a document in 2017, and it's taken a long time to get through it. Basically going through all the senior team records for the last 20 years. So it's taken a long time. But I wanted to get this done because it's an important part of the club's history that otherwise hasn't been put out there in public record and hasn't been properly recorded. So I wanted to get this together and put it out there to the members, and something for the club to look back and recognise, people that have contributed in the past. So It's basically a list of all the games played and goals scored of every player in the last 20 years. We'll release that in the next week or two. And I'm sure yourself and Dimitri put together a nice little montage and something we can reflect on in the next couple of weeks. So, it's taken a long time, but we wanted to, recognise anyone who's been part of the club and played their part in any which way. So I'm happy that it's finished now. It's taken a while, but we finally got there.
So how did you find the data? Is it literally you had to find a team sheet for every game for the last 20 years and then put it in like a giant, Microsoft Excel spreadsheet? Or how did you go about, one, finding it and then sort of putting it together?
Yeah, well, putting it together was the tedious part, but the easier part, getting the data took me a long time. Basically, FFV had records for about 10 years only, and that was sort of mid-2000s to 2014-15. The last 3 or 4 years, is everything's online now, so it's been easier to get the data, more specific data of the team sheets in the last 4 or 5 years. But yeah, it's taken a long time, and finally was able to, through a few different sources online, to dig up the archives of games back in the early part of the century. And yeah, just going week by week, game by game. Some of the records wasn't the best quality, so it was hard to read some of the names and some of the substitutions and things like that. But I wanted to make sure it was done as accurate as possible. Just tediously going through each week and marking down everyone who played and obviously scored goals as well. So it's quite comprehensive, and hopefully it's at least 99% accurate as to what the records show online anyway.
And so what period of time do the stats cover?
Yeah, so I found back to 2000. So that was, I think, the club's 3rd or 4th season in the provisional leagues before we switched over from the old metropolitan leagues. So unfortunately I couldn't get any records further back than that. It would have been nice to go all the way back, into the 90s. But it's basically 20 years of data, including the 5 rounds that have been played this year. So it's all up to date.
So now that you've gone through and compiled everything, what does the data show? So who has the most goals and who has the most appearances for the club?
Yeah, correct. So it's games and goals, and basically 250 players have played for the seniors in that 20-year period, and it's basically a collation of everyone's total number of games, whether there were starting players or they'd come off the bench. So obviously players that had made an appearance, and then every goal recorded. The goals were pretty accurate. There was probably 1 or 2 own goals that weren't sort of listed at all. But in terms of players that had scored, obviously, considering the referees had to mark these down correctly back after the games. But the goal scoring records are quite accurate. And it's a list of every player that scored at least 1 goal and played at least 1 game from 2000.
Amazing. So who's number 1 then?
Well, we wanted to leave a bit of a teaser for next week.
All right, okay.
I guess anyone that's been at the club for a long time knows Marin Jancic played for the club for over, I think, 12, 13 years. So he's the games record holder. And 99% of his games were in the first team. Didn't have many injuries. I played with Marin for 7 or 8 years, and maybe a bit more than that. He was quite frequent on the team sheet and also obviously in the goals. So he holds the games record. But I might add to that, the current day games are quite long, the seasons are now, so there's a good chance for a few of the current players to quickly catch up to the records. So when we release the list, a lot of people will be able to see where they sort of fall into that.
Well, Marin, not only is Marin, the games record holder, but he's also the goals record scorer at the club as well with 99. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So, I couldn't get him over the line with 100, but 99 goals were recorded. Marin come to Avondale from overseas, from Croatia, and he was fantastic from the start. I remember, I think it would have been my first or maybe my second year as a 16-year-old training with the seniors, and he was just amazing. You couldn't tackle him as a defender, and he'd just bang in the goals week after week. And then if you look at online, the records, you'll see every second week he was a goal scorer for the club. So his consistency over a 10-year period was fantastic. It wasn't until the last season where he sort of was injured a little bit more. But yeah, he played a lot of years, was leading goal scorer for the club and the league. So yeah, hopefully we can get in touch with Marin and bring him back to the club.
So from a club point of view, why is it important to have access to this kind of historical data and these statistics?
Well, there was two pieces of motivation. One, obviously, in terms of a club record, the club hadn't had anything like that put together before. So, it's important to remember your past and remember the achievements of anyone who's, been at the club. So that was the main motivation. And also, to try to bring some of these guys back to the club. As a player, everyone would know that you don't get to choose your terms on how you leave the club. Most of the time, if the coach moves you on, then you get moved on. So for us as a club, it's important to recognise, everyone that's, played their small part in any which way to help us get to where we are today. So they're the main motivations behind it. And I think it's come together quite well.
The data also covers some pretty significant moments in our club's history. What are some of the major achievements that happened during this period?
Well, there was quite a few, and you look at, straight away, you look at the championships, but the back-to-back relegations was actually the turning point for the club, and that was sort of a kickstart to, a period of success thereafter. So, the club has gone through ups and downs, as every club does. And it's how we responded in those late, 2008, 9, 10 years that sort of set the club up. So there's been some fantastic years, and 2012 and 14, the two championship years, obviously stick out. But also coming up to the NPL was, a fantastic achievement that, only 8 or 9 years back we never thought we'd get to. So yeah, great times.
And taking a look at the list, I know you said you don't want to go into too much detail about who comes where, but I've had a look, and you yourself feature on the list. You're actually third on the list for total games played with 140 appearances for Avondale. Tell us a little bit about your career. What was the most memorable game you played in at Avondale?
Most memorable, well, one game sticks out that I've always remembered quite clearly. Some games you sort of just get a picture in your mind and it sort of sticks with you. That was the 2012 championship year. So it was basically an amazing day. We'd basically been second for pretty much the whole season. A game, 2 points, 1 point behind Sydenham Park, who were on top for most of the year. I think we were a point behind coming into the last game of the season. We played away at Melbourne University and grinded out a 2-0 win. They were sitting about mid-table at the time. Our game finished and we're all, gathered around in the middle of the pitch waiting to hear the result of the other game down the road. And Sydenham Park happened to lose 2-1 at home to the team that was already relegated at the time. So wow. To our shock and amazement, we'd sort of heard the news over the phone. One of our supporters went to watch and made the phone call pretty much 5 minutes after we finished our game. And yeah, it was party time. So that game really stood out.
What position did you play?
Through my junior days, I was a striker, but coming into senior football, as you do as a young kid coming into the seniors, you sort of get put into a position and you just do as you're told. So played right back for pretty much my whole senior career. Couple of games here and there in the midfield, but yeah, mainly as a right back, and yeah, it sort of stood me well in that position, and some good times over the years with many different players playing alongside you. So very good memories.
What first attracted you to Avondale, and then secondly, what kept you at the club for so long? Because once you finished your playing career, you've obviously been involved with the club now as a board member. So what brought you to the club and what's kept you here?
Yeah, well, a mate of mine that I was playing at my junior club with, who's also quite high up on the list, Fabian Gugliandolo, brought me across. There was a year I wasn't playing in 2003. I hadn't played. And so I had a year off from after junior football, and wanted to get back into it as a 15-year-old. So came across with a mate of mine, and at the time I think the club only had 3 junior teams, and it was a new under-16s team back then. So yeah, played with a few mates, having a kick, and then before we knew it, the next season we were in the reserves and training with the seniors as young 16-year-olds. So that's how I got across to the club. And of course, you know, in any good environment, you meet great people and you become close friends. And even though I played for 10 years, once I sort of hurt my knee and retired, it sort of, you know, you got lifelong friends, all your best mates are at the soccer club, people you spend 48, 50 weeks of the year with and party with on the weekends, you know. You sort of just stick around, and got that sort of got me onto the committee, and yeah, I've just been with the club ever since.
What division was the club at when you first started playing?
So my first season coming from under 16 into the reserve senior team, provisional 3. So that was the 7th tier of competition back then, which is now, I guess, State League 4, I think it is. So the leagues have sort of changed and restructured a couple of times over the last couple of decades. But yeah, 2003 was my first year.
So when back in 2003, you're playing in the 7th tier of Victorian football. Did you ever imagine or picture that the club Avondale would end up where it is today? You know, at Avenger Park, in the NPL, top tier of Victorian football, fighting for, you know, the championships and premierships for pretty much every year. Did you ever envision the club getting that high?
Well, back then, as a young kid, you just want to play, really. So no, back then, coming to the club, we didn't have those aspirations. The club was, you know, a social club, basically. Great guys and some good players as well. But you know, we're happy just to have a kick, and you know, if we won, great. But if not, we'd still party as hard on that Saturday night. So it was good times back in the days. But as I mentioned before, the back-to-back promotions really hurt. We started to attract some good players to the club, and we didn't feel that, you know, we deserved to, you know, play in those lower leagues. So
sorry,
we sort of kept
relegations.
Yeah, correct. So
Yeah.
After those back-to-back relegations is when we sort of said, all right, you know, we're better than this now. You know, we need to start, you know, getting, you know, a good group together and start moving up the ranks. So we sort of, you know, realigned, and the club sort of changed a bit off field as well, changed our goals a bit, and yeah, started to make our way through the ranks. But it wasn't until that point, after our first probably 1 or 2 promotions, that we thought that, you know, within 5 or 10 years, we might get up to, you know, State League 1 maybe. But to play in the Premier League, it's been, yeah, beyond our wildest dreams back then.
What has been, like, looking back on everything, the most remarkable change that you've seen from when you first started playing to where the club is now?
Well, I don't think there's one that stands out more than anything. There's always a lot of changes every year, whether that's something that you physically see off the field or just, you know, turnover in players and that sort of thing. You know, obviously having back-to-back relegations, a lot of people move on and leave the club. So there was a reset at that point in 2009. But having said that, you know, we've always had good people come to the club, and from that point on, you know, we sort of kept a good group together. So there wasn't that big turnover and change. And you got to have a board or committee that's, you know, that's motivated, and that's, wants to reach and set high expectations. So that's been a constant, and that's been the reason, you know, you sort of keep wanting to improve, and that's how you get better and better, and it sort of relates on the field as well.
So you had 140 appearances for the club. You also netted yourself 7 goals during that 140 game stretch. What was the best goal you scored?
Best goal. Well, I remember it clearly because there was probably a couple of penalties in those 7. But I scored off a corner, similar to how Blake did in round 2 this year. I can't remember what year it was. It would have been in the early days. Just had a nice wind blowing toward the goal, and you know, our players who were standing on the keeper did their job, and it sort of just curled into the far top corner off the corner kick. So that's the one that, yeah, stands out.
That was definitely what you were aiming for, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Put it on the spot.
So keeping a track of the statistics, how's it going to go moving forward? Is this a list that we're going to keep adding to this year and as the games progress?
100%. Yeah. So now that we've got it all up to date, the current players will see their names up there, highlighted with an asterisk, obviously, as they're still going. So yeah, it's good motivation for any player starting with the club to try to get up there and be part of that, the club's history and try to make their own mark, I guess, in a different way. So everyone, goes about things differently, but it's important that we recognise individuals as well as the team success as well.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on compiling the work. I think you said it was 3 years, and how many games do you reckon you had to go through?
Games, I don't know. There was, there was who knows, 200, 250 games. So yeah, a lot of data.
Well, congratulations and thanks for putting in the hard work. We will be releasing the full list shortly, where people can go back through, see everyone who's played, as you said, one game or scored for the club at any stage over since 2000. So that's fantastic. Yep. Fantastic information for the club to have, and a fantastic piece of history for the club to hold on to. So thank you very much for joining us and for telling us about the history of the club.
No worries. And for anyone on that list, I mean, the main part of this was, for the club to reconnect. So yeah, reach out to us, come to watch us when we get back into games, and we'll welcome you back to the club. So we want to see everyone around the boys, and hopefully we can get a season in 2020 and have some more success.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Anthony, and see you soon, Avengers.